Should everyone remove gluten from their diet? Many people believe that gluten is universally bad for everyone. But in fact, the data seems to indicate that this is not correct. Even one of the most published authors on the topic, Dr. Alessio Fasano, states that people who don't have a problem with gluten should continue to eat it. So what is the case? Should everyone remove gluten from their diet? Or are there drawbacks to doing so? In today's video, we find out. Before we begin, let's get a little background information. First off, gluten is a peptide found in grains, and it is poorly digested by humans. Now, a lot of people will say we cannot digest gluten, but that's not true. We do partially digest it. But what causes problems with gluten? Well, microbial factors affecting the immune reaction to gluten either increase the immune response or decrease it. So, if you need to remove it, it's a good idea, but if you don't need to, there are some drawbacks to removing it. Here we have an image looking at the differences between what happens when somebody who is susceptible to celiac disease consumes gluten on the left-hand side of the image, and on the right-hand side of the image we have what happens under homeostasis or in an otherwise healthy person. First step, our proteases or protein digesting enzymes break down gluten into smaller fragments. Additionally, there are other components in wheat such as amylase tryptase inhibitors that prevent our proteases from working effectively, which also may play a role. And this releases these gluten fragments into the mucus layer of our gut. Here on the left-hand side, we have what bacteria do to further break down gluten. We're looking specifically at a microbe known as Pseudomonas aeruginosus. It further breaks down gluten using its protein digesting enzymes, which release gluten fragments that can actually induce leaky gut. We're looking specifically here at different types of gliadin. There's alpha gliadin, beta gliadin, gamma gliadin. And when these gluten fragments enter into our manage to make it past our gut, tissue transglutaminase alters it further, which really ramps up the immune response. Here, we will look at gluten in health. Again, same thing happens up front. We partially break down gluten and release these same gluten fragments, potentially even less immunogenic gluten fragments because microbes can also act on wheat amylase tryptase inhibitors so that we can break it down a little better. But regardless, we still have bacteria that further break it down, which in some cases this can increase immunogenicity, ramp up their immune system, but we have other bacteria that further break it down, and these intermediate bacteria actually make it less immunogenic or effectively benign. At this point, the gliadin fragments cannot cross the intestinal barrier, so our brush border enzymes will break it down completely, release amino acids, then enter the circulation, and cause no problem to us whatsoever. So what are the takeaways from this information that we just laid out for you? Well, first off, the microbiome plays a modifiable role in gluten sensitivity. In other words, it can make gluten more immunogenic or less immunogenic or even benign depending on the composition of your microbiome. We do know from the trove of microbiome studies we have that our diet will alter our microbiome, particularly diets we take on for a long period of time. And through this information, we can deduce that a long-term gluten-free diet potentially may increase our sensitivity to gluten by decreasing the intermediate bacteria that effectively detoxify, if you will, gluten by making it less immunogenic so that our brush border enzymes can act on it and just simply make it amino acids by the time it gets into our bloodstream. Theoretically speaking, too, a long-term gluten-free diet could lower our sensitivity if we're looking at something like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which actually takes the gluten fragments that we release and turns them into more immunogenic proteins. Theoretically, it could lower it as well. But we do have long-term data on gluten-free diets actually causing potential detrimental impacts on the microbiome by decreasing beneficial bacteria. This doesn't mean that you have to include gluten in your diet. It's more than likely something else that's typically in wheat that people remove. The problem is there are other components of wheat, such as FODMAPs, which were recently shown to be the problem for most people in IBS who believe they have a sensitivity to wheat rather than gluten being the problem. However, when we have a long-term diet removing certain things and not replacing it with something that can help maintain this beneficial microbial population, we will definitely lose them. So what does that mean? If you have the celiac disease, you clearly should remove gluten from your diet. If you have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, you should remove it and probably do a reintroduction, potentially even reintroducing gluten without FODMAPs. That's not going to change that you're going to now be able to consume bread because bread has FODMAPs in it. But it's a good idea to figure it out. A lot of people don't want to remove gluten from their diet, and it's best to find the actual target. Furthermore, don't just remove gluten from your diet because it's a fad diet. Figure you're going to take it out for a couple of months to lose weight. Most of the reason why people lose weight when they go on a gluten-free diet is because they're removing processed foods. So even if you replace those processed foods with gluten-free versions, it's not beneficial to you, and there's the potential to cause problems and actually increase your sensitivity. So that's why we want to do reintroduction after elimination. For one, you can find out whether you are sensitive to it or not, and two, you may find a tolerable level that is perfectly fine for you. So that about does it. Thank you very much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this. As always, questions, comments, drop them in the comment section below. Constructive criticisms as well. And if you like this video and you want more, please like or share on social media. Thank you very much.